I've moved on. The money is mine. The house is mine. Good luck over there. I stared at the email on my laptop screen, the words blurring slightly in the harsh, flickering fluorescent light of the communications tent. Around me, the constant, low hum of generators and the crackle of distant radio chatter filled the air, the familiar soundtrack to my life at forward operating base Lightning in the heart of Afghanistan. The smell of dust and diesel fuel hung heavy, a permanent scent that clung to my uniform, my hair, my very skin. But none of that registered. All I could focus on were those 17 words. 17 words that had just detonated a bomb in the center of my world, leaving nothing but smoking wreckage. My name is Lauren Bishop. I'm 35 years old, a captain in the United States Army, a nurse practitioner. And I was 6 months, halfway, through my third deployment when my husband, Eric, the man I had promised my life to, decided to destroy our marriage via email. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs. Not a phone call. Not even a video chat where he'd have to look me in the eye. Just a cold, calculated message, sent while I was 7,000 miles away, serving my country, living in a world of sand, sweat, and the constant, thrumming anxiety of imminent danger. My hands trembled as I scrolled down, my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. He had attached files. My stomach churned as I clicked on the first one. Divorce papers. Already filed. The second click revealed our joint bank statements. No, not our statements. His statements. The balance was a neat, insulting zero. $38,000. Gone. Money I had painstakingly saved, dollar by dollar, from my military pay, working grueling night shifts at the base hospital before my deployment, taking extra training courses that meant months away from home, all while he bounced between part-time jobs and grand, get-rich-quick schemes that never panned out. Then came the photos. A young, blonde woman, barely out of her teens, it looked like, was lounging in what was unmistakably my living room. Her feet, clad in fluffy pink slippers, were propped up on the coffee table I had saved for months to buy. The one I had pictured us gathered around with friends, sharing stories and laughter. In another photo, she was wearing my favorite necklace, a simple silver locket Eric had given me on our first anniversary. It was a punch to the gut, a violation so deep it felt like he had reached across continents to personally defile every memory we had ever built. The injustice burned in my chest, a white-hot, acidic fire. For 6 months, I had been sleeping in a concrete bunker, the ground shaking from distant explosions. I had been eating MREs, meals ready to eat, and dodging mortar fire. I had held the hands of dying soldiers, patched up wounds that would haunt my nightmares, and pushed my body and mind to their absolute limits, all while believing I had a safe, loving home to return to. And while I did that, Eric was living it up with his new girlfriend in the very home I had worked for years to afford, on the money I had earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The email signature of his new paramour, Brittany Hart, was the final, sickening flourish, future Mrs. Bishop. She was 22, according to the file information. The audacity was breathtaking. She was wearing my jewelry, sitting on my furniture, and was probably sleeping in my bed. But as I read the email a second time and then a third, something inside me shifted. The initial shock, the wave of grief and betrayal, began to recede. It gave way to something colder, harder, more calculating. A chilling clarity settled over me, the kind of focus I'd only ever felt in the trauma bay when a mass casualty event was called. Emotion was a liability. Panic was a killer. Strategy was survival. Eric had always underestimated me. He saw the woman who cooked his dinner and did his laundry. He saw the accommodating wife who supported his flimsy dreams and patiently waited for him to find himself. He never truly saw the soldier. He never understood that the military doesn't just train you to fight, it forges you into a planner, a strategist, someone who anticipates threats and prepares for every contingency. He had forgotten who he had married. He had made a critical, catastrophic error in judgment. And as the rage settled into an icy, unshakable determination, I realized he was about to learn exactly who he had married. I closed my laptop, the click echoing in the sudden silence of my mind. I walked outside into the cool Afghan night. The sky, unpolluted by city lights, was a breathtaking canopy of stars, more brilliant and vast than they ever were back home. This was far from over. This was just the beginning. The next morning brought the familiar, grinding routine of deployment life, but everything felt different now. The betrayal was a constant, low hum beneath the surface of my thoughts. As I went through my duties at the base medical facility, treating everything from routine checkups to gruesome combat injuries, my mind kept circling back to Eric's betrayal. The other soldiers, men and women I'd come to know as my family, noticed my distraction. "You okay, Captain?" Staff Sergeant Martinez asked, his brow furrowed with genuine concern as we prepped for the morning briefing. "You seem off today." I forced a smile, the gesture feeling foreign on my face. "Just tired. Long night." But it wasn't tiredness. It was the peculiar, hyper-focused clarity that comes when someone you trusted completely reveals their true nature. Eric and I had been married for 8 years, together for 10. We met when I was a young lieutenant, fresh out of officer candidate school, and he was working at a sports bar near Fort Campbell. He was charming, funny, and seemed to understand the demands of military life. Or so I thought. Looking back, the warning signs had been there for years, like faint cracks in a foundation that I had deliberately painted over. The way he always seemed to have excuses when bills were due. The way he would disappear for hours without explanation, claiming he was job hunting or meeting with potential business partners. The gradual shift from a supportive spouse to someone who subtly, and then overtly, resented my career, my deployments, my success. During my first deployment to Iraq, he had been the perfect military spouse, care packages, daily emails, promises to hold down the fort. By my second deployment, the communications had become sporadic, filled with complaints about how hard his life was while I was gone. This time, I had barely heard from him at all. I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there in hindsight. The way he had pushed me to add his name to all our accounts before this deployment, claiming it would make managing finances easier while I was gone. How he had insisted on handling all the household finances because my military schedule was too unpredictable. The gradual, insidious isolation from my friends and family, always with reasonable-sounding excuses about why we couldn't visit or why they couldn't come over. What Eric didn't know, what he had never bothered to learn, was that military life teaches you to plan for the worst. We don't trust blindly, we verify, we prepare, we create redundancies. And years ago, when I first started deploying, I had taken steps, legal, ironclad steps, that Eric was about to discover in the most painful way possible. As I went through my medical rounds that day, checking on soldiers recovering from everything from broken bones to shrapnel wounds, I thought about trust. These men and women trusted me with their lives, their pain, their fears. I took that responsibility with the utmost seriousness. I had extended that same absolute trust to Eric, and he had weaponized it against me. But trust is a two-way street, and betrayal comes with consequences. Eric was about to learn that the woman he thought he knew, the compliant wife who managed the household while he pursued his dreams, had been planning for this possibility all along. I waited until after evening chow to respond to Eric's email. The mess tent had emptied out, leaving just a few soldiers playing cards in the corner and the ever-present sound of helicopters coming and going from the landing zone. The chaos of the day had subsided, and in the relative quiet, I felt a calm I hadn't experienced since reading his message. I returned to the communications tent, the generator humming a steady rhythm. I opened my laptop and stared at the cursor blinking in the reply field. Years of military training had taught me the value of measured responses. When someone attacks you, you don't react emotionally. You assess the situation, you gather intelligence, and you respond strategically. Eric's email wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a tactical error of epic proportions. I typed 5 words. "Are you sure about that?" Then I hit send. The beauty of the response was its simplicity. It was a single, clean shot, fired with precision. Eric would read it and wonder what I meant. He would probably dismiss it as the desperate, pathetic bluster of a woman who had just lost everything. He would go back to his new life with Brittany, confident that he had outmaneuvered me completely. And for the next few days, he would be right to feel confident. But confidence built on ignorance is dangerous. And Eric's understanding of our financial situation, of me, was fatally flawed. 3 years ago, before my second deployment, I had sat in the sterile, quiet office of a JAG attorney, Major Patricia Holmes. She was a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I instantly respected. I had gone to her with a vague sense of unease, a gut feeling I couldn't shake about Eric's increasing control over our finances. "I see this more often than I care to admit, Captain Bishop," she had said, her voice devoid of judgment but full of weary experience. "Deployment stress breaks marriages. And when they break, the spouse at home usually has all the advantages. They control the mail, the finances, the narrative. You need to protect yourself." So I had. Following her explicit, step-by-step instructions, I established a military spouse financial protection trust. It was a complex but brilliant legal instrument. It legally separated my military pay and assets from our joint accounts, placing them under the protection of a trust that only I could access. The joint accounts, the ones Eric had so gleefully emptied, were a decoy. I had deliberately left a substantial but not life-altering amount of money in them, the $38,000, to maintain the illusion of normality, a honeypot for his greed. My real assets, including the deed to the house, which was solely in my name as per the trust documents, and the bulk of my savings, were protected under military regulations that carried federal criminal penalties for unauthorized access. Eric had stolen money from a deployed service member. That wasn't just divorce court material, that was federal crime territory. After sending my cryptic reply to Eric, I opened a new email. Not to Eric this time, but to Major Holmes, with a carbon copy to my civilian attorney back home in Clarksville, Tennessee, a firecracker named Rebecca Chen from Morrison and Associates. I attached Eric's email, the bank statements, the photos, and a brief, factual summary of the situation. I ended with a simple request: please proceed as planned. I leaned back in my bunk, a grim smile tugging at the corners of my mouth for the first time in days. Eric had no idea what was about to hit him. The Service Member Civil Relief Act, SCRA, wasn't just military bureaucracy, it was a federal law with teeth, designed to protect deployed service members from exactly the kind of financial predation Eric had just committed. Violating it carried serious consequences, including criminal charges and mandatory restitution. More importantly, it meant that everything Eric thought he had gained was about to be reversed. Over the next 48 hours, a series of emails began flowing in from my legal team. The civilian attorney, Rebecca Chen, was particularly thorough in her updates. "Lauren," she wrote, "I wanted you to know that we have obtained emergency court orders freezing all accounts that Eric accessed without authorization. The bank records show that the withdrawals began 3 weeks ago, well within the time frame covered by your deployment protection orders. We have also confirmed that the house deed remains solely in your name, as the trust documents specified. Eric never had legal authority to claim ownership." The next email was even better. "Additionally, I have been in contact with the local sheriff's department. The house has been secured, and all unauthorized occupants have been removed. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, has been keeping an eye on the property and reports that Eric and his girlfriend were quite surprised by the law enforcement visit yesterday morning." I could picture it perfectly: Eric, probably still in his pajamas, answering the door to find deputies with court orders. The look of confusion giving way to dawning panic as they explained that he was living in a house that didn't belong to him, that the money he had spent belonged to a deployed service member, and that his actions constituted multiple federal crimes. The girlfriend, Brittany, had probably been even more shocked. 22 years old and suddenly facing the reality that her sugar daddy was actually a criminal who had been living on stolen money. I wondered how long it had taken her to pack her bags. But the most satisfying email came from Major Holmes herself, updating me on the criminal investigation. Captain Bishop, the FBI Financial Crimes Division has accepted the case due to the interstate nature of the crimes and the federal military protections involved. Agent Martinez will be the lead investigator. Eric Bishop is being charged with wire fraud, theft from a government employee, and violations of the Servicemember Civil Relief Act. Each charge carries significant prison time and mandatory restitution. The agent wanted me to tell you that this is one of the clearest cases of military spouse financial abuse she has seen. I closed my laptop and stepped outside into the Afghan night. The desert air was crisp and clear, with the kind of profound silence you never get in populated areas. For the first time since receiving Eric's email, I felt truly, deeply calm. Eric had thought he was so clever. He had probably spent weeks, if not months, planning this, timing it for when I was at my most vulnerable and isolated. He had counted on the distance, the communication delays, the assumption that I was too far away and too distracted by combat operations to respond effectively. He had forgotten that I was a soldier. And soldiers don't just fight battles, we plan for them. 2 weeks later, I received an email that made me laugh out loud in the middle of a briefing, earning a concerned look from Captain Rodriguez. I showed him my phone screen. It was an email from Eric, and the subject line read, "Please call me urgent." The message was a masterpiece of panic and desperate bargaining. "Lauren, I think there's been some kind of mistake. The police came to the house and said I was under federal investigation. They froze all my accounts and said I have to move out. This is insane. I know you're upset about the divorce, but this has gone too far. Can't we work this out like adults? I'm willing to give you half the money back if you call off the lawyers. Please call me as soon as you get this. My phone might be disconnected soon because I can't access my bank accounts. This is ruining my life." The best part was the complete and utter lack of acknowledgement that he had done anything wrong. No apology for the betrayal, no recognition that he had stolen from a deployed service member. Just pure, unadulterated outrage that there were consequences for his actions. I forwarded the email to Major Holmes with a simple note, "I assume Eric's panic means the investigation is proceeding smoothly." Her response was immediate. Agent Martinez reports that Eric Bishop retained a public defender yesterday. Apparently, no private attorney was willing to take his case pro bono, and all his assets are frozen pending the investigation. The girlfriend, Brittany, disappeared 2 days ago. Her social media posts suggest she has returned to her parents' home in Florida and is claiming she had no knowledge of the criminal activity. I almost felt sorry for Brittany. Almost. She was young and probably genuinely naive about Eric's financial situation. But she had also been perfectly happy to live in my house, wear my jewelry, and post photos of herself enjoying the fruits of my labor while I was dodging bullets in Afghanistan. Ignorance might be a legal defense, but it wasn't a moral one. The military grapevine at the FOB had picked up on my situation, as military grapevines always do. Word had gotten around that Captain Bishop was dealing with a cheating spouse back home, and the response from my fellow soldiers was overwhelmingly supportive. Care packages started arriving with little notes, "Hang in there, Captain. Your military family has your back. Some people aren't worth the uniform." Staff Sergeant Martinez, who had noticed my mood the day I received Eric's original email, pulled me aside after the evening briefing. "Captain, I don't know all the details of what you're dealing with back home, but I wanted you to know that my wife went through something similar during my first deployment. Spouse cleaned out their accounts and moved in with someone else. It nearly destroyed her." "What happened?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Military legal helped her fight. It took 2 years, but she got everything back and then some. The ex ended up doing time for fraud. Military justice doesn't mess around when it comes to protecting deployed families." He smiled, a small, knowing look in his eyes. How is she doing now? Martinez's smile widened. Remarried to a good man who actually deserves her. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. As I walked back to my quarters that night, I thought about his words. Eric's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also revealed truths I might never have discovered otherwise. His true character, the strength of my military family, the wisdom of the precautions I had taken years earlier. Most importantly, it had reminded me who I really was. I was not the accommodating wife who had spent years making excuses for a man who didn't deserve them. I was Captain Lauren Bishop, a combat veteran who had survived 3 deployments and earned the respect of her peers through competence and courage. Eric had picked a fight with the wrong woman. The 3rd week brought news that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Major Holmes called me personally this time, rather than sending an email. Satellite phone calls were precious commodities on deployment, usually reserved for emergencies or the most important communications. Captain Bishop, she said, her voice crackling slightly through the connection. I wanted to give you a personal update on the investigation. Agent Martinez has uncovered additional evidence that significantly strengthens the case against your husband. What kind of evidence? It appears that Eric's financial crimes extended beyond just your accounts, she explained. The FBI discovered that he had been using your military credentials to apply for credit cards and loans, forging your signature on documents while you were deployed. The total amount of fraud now exceeds $100,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. $100,000? Credit cards in your name that you never authorized. A second mortgage on the house that he obtained using forged documents. A personal loan from a predatory lender that used your military service record as collateral. Eric Bishop wasn't just unfaithful, Captain. He was running a sophisticated financial fraud operation using your identity and military status. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. While I had been focused on the $38,000 he had stolen from our joint account, Eric had been systematically destroying my financial life through identity theft and fraud. The good news, Major Holmes continued, her voice firm, is that all of these crimes fall under federal jurisdiction due to your military status. The penalties are severe, and the evidence is overwhelming. Agent Martinez believes this will be one of the strongest military spouse fraud cases she has ever prosecuted. What happens now? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Eric will be formally arrested within the next 48 hours. The charges include identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery, and multiple violations of military protection statutes. He's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. After the call ended, I sat in stunned silence. The man I had married, the person I had trusted with my life and my future, had been systematically destroying everything I had worked for. The betrayal was so complete, so calculating, that it took my breath away. But alongside the shock came a fierce, undeniable satisfaction. Eric had thought he was so clever, using my deployment as cover for his crimes. He had assumed that I was too far away, too distracted, too trusting to discover his schemes until it was too late to stop them. He had been wrong on every count. 6 weeks later, I received the email I had been waiting for. Agent Martinez sent it directly, with copies to Major Holmes and Rebecca Chen. The subject line was simple, case closed. Captain Bishop, she wrote. Eric Bishop has accepted a plea agreement. He pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence of 12 years in federal prison and full restitution of all stolen funds, including penalties and interest. The total restitution amount is $147,000. Additionally, he has agreed to forfeit any claim to marital assets and will not contest the divorce. I read the email 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. Eric, who had started this nightmare by stealing from me while I served my country, was now facing 12 years in prison and complete financial ruin. The man who had thought he could outsmart a deployed soldier had been outmaneuvered at every turn. The restitution amount was particularly satisfying. Not only would I recover every penny he had stolen, but the penalties and interest meant I would actually come out ahead financially. Eric's crimes had backfired so spectacularly that they had made me wealthier than I had been before his betrayal. Rebecca Chen's follow-up email contained even better news. Lauren, because Eric signed the asset forfeiture agreement, you now have clear title to the house with no outstanding liens. The fraudulent second mortgage has been voided, and the predatory loan has been transferred to Eric's personal responsibility. You will resume ownership of all marital assets immediately upon your return from deployment. I closed my laptop and walked outside to watch the sunset over the Afghan mountains. The desert sky was painted in brilliant oranges and purples, the kind of natural beauty that reminded you why some things were worth fighting for. Eric had tried to take everything from me while I was serving my country. Instead, his greed and stupidity had cost him his freedom, his future, and any claim to the life we had built together. The woman he had betrayed was coming home to a debt-free house, a clean credit record, and the deep, profound satisfaction of seeing justice served. 3 months later, I stepped off the plane at Nashville International Airport, officially home from my third deployment. The Tennessee air felt humid and thick after months in the desert, but it smelled like freedom. My sister Jenna was waiting at the gate, her face lighting up when she saw me. We hadn't talked much during the deployment. I had kept the details of Eric's crimes private, sharing only the basic fact that we were divorcing. Now, as we drove toward Clarksville, I filled her in on everything that had happened. 12 years, she asked, her voice incredulous. For stealing from you? For stealing from a deployed service member, I corrected. The federal penalties are severe when you commit crimes against military families. Eric learned that the hard way. What about the girlfriend? Brittany? She cooperated with the investigation in exchange for immunity. Turns out she genuinely had no idea about the fraud. She thought Eric was just a successful businessman with a wife overseas. When she found out the truth, she helped the FBI trace the money. We pulled into my driveway, and I stared at the house I hadn't seen in 9 months. It looked exactly the same from the outside, but everything about it felt different now. This wasn't the home I had shared with Eric. It was my home. Bought with my sacrifice and defended with my planning. Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor, came rushing over as soon as she saw the car. Lauren. Welcome home, honey. I kept an eye on everything, just like you asked. That husband of yours sure made a scene when the police came. I've never seen anything like it. Thank you for watching the house, Mrs. Patterson. I appreciate everything you did. Are you doing okay, dear? This must have been so hard for you. I looked at my house, my sister, the familiar neighborhood where I would now build a new life, and I smiled a real, genuine smile. Actually, Mrs. Patterson, I'm doing better than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The revenge I had taken wasn't about anger or hatred. It was about justice, preparation, and the simple, immutable truth that actions have consequences. Eric had gambled everything on the assumption that I was too far away and too trusting to protect myself. And he had lost. Completely. As I walked into my house for the first time as a truly free woman, I reflected on how his betrayal had ultimately revealed my own strength and taught me that sometimes, the most devastating revenge is simply letting someone destroy themselves with their own choices.